So welcome everyone to the latest edition of the Irish 30 series. We are delighted to have John Corrigan with us tonight, talking about searching for a job, which is a key thing in any situation, but particularly at the moment with the challenges that COVID has presented to us all. The job search is becoming even more important, and I know John has some fantastic tips and insights and some great experience to share with us this evening. I might actually pass across to you, John, just to introduce yourself and give a little bit of background.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Look, great to come on here today and present a few ideas. For me, just as an introduction, so I'm from Cork originally, where I studied my master's in marketing in Dublin. Originally did my degree in business and CIT. Started my career in advertising and marketing, and then worked for about 2 or 3 years in Dublin with one of Ireland's leading direct marketing agencies. Then I decided to travel, and I landed in Melbourne back in 2011. So we're talking almost 9 years ago now. And fell into recruitment. And I use that word fall because at the time, the reason I got into it was I came to a new country. So I decided, okay, let's do something new, something outside of my comfort zone. And finally, they waived the visa in front of me, which was enticing at the time. So decided to say yes. So I was lucky enough that recruitment had been good to me. I had altogether about 9 years recruitment experience. So look, what I want to talk about today is the 3 ways to find a job, which is your network, which is applying directly through Seek and LinkedIn, and thirdly, how to engage and build a relationship with recruiters. The other points I'd like to talk about is the mindset you have from a job searching point of view, and also how to deal with the emotional roller coaster of rejection after rejection, if that's what's happening. Because look, in the current COVID crisis, it's probably going to be a bit more difficult and complex to get a job. So I'll leave it kind of as a question and answers forum, guys. So feel free to ask questions and we can answer on a case by case.
Thanks, Sean. I might actually start off by asking you a question then. And obviously anyone else on the call, if you want to ask a question, if you want to just take yourself off mute, you're more than welcome to ask questions. Would provide opportunities to do that. But just given the current circumstances, and obviously we were talking even before the call started about we're in an unprecedented situation, certainly in our lifetimes. Is there anything in particular that would be important for people to think about just at this present time?
Yeah, look, it's something that I remind people about all the time. When it comes to your job search, timing is everything, really. And one of my big mantra is the length of time it takes you to get a job. Don't equate your worth to how long it takes you. For some people, you can get lucky, you can apply for the first job, meet a person, you connect, and within 2 or 3 weeks, you've got a job. For others, it can take 3 months, it can take 6 months, coming second. So my big mantra is don't equate your worth, your intrinsic worth to how long it takes you to find a job. It's really, really kind of have a perspective of it's timing, and it's about the right opportunity for you and a win-win for both you and your potential employer. And ultimately, it comes down to timing. Obviously, what you do is important, but you shouldn't hold your whole hat that if you don't get a job within a month or 2 months or your first 3 or 4 interviews, just have some perspective in the current climate that it's going to be a bit more challenging than it normally is.
And I think that's a really good point, isn't it? That you can do all that you can do, but it's still up to somebody else ultimately to decide whether you're going to get that job or not. And as you say, it's timing can be very important. And you mentioned about your network. What kind of advice would you have for people in terms of building their network? And what would be some tips and strategies they could use to do that?
Yeah, look, one of the biggest things is, and I think Roisin mentioned it there just before we started recording, around she's used to getting a lot of her jobs through her network, through word of mouth. And even this day and age, and even as a recruitment consultant, I advise a lot of my candidates to ensure they are networking, because there's no bigger advocate than the people who know you, the people who trust you, the people who potentially have worked with you before, and they know your character and what you're like. So that stage of trying to fake an interview and getting a job, it's very much people in your network who know you are the best advocates for you in terms of employment. And look, with the question on who do you network with, I mean, it's kind of, you go back to basics. You think of, okay, are you joining any, I suppose, professional networking groups, depending on your field. Like my field is marketing, but you look at social clubs, the sporting clubs you're with, it could be, the reading clubs that you're with, it could be volunteering. That's what I'm talking about, networking, past people that you would have worked with a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. So it's really about nurturing old relationships or existing relationships. And, if you're doing it well enough, they'll introduce you to new people. And then it's a bit of a snowball effect on that.
And is that just a case of catching up with people, John? Like, how would you recommend people go about doing that?
Yeah, look, it's. I think you have to be quite. I'm a big believer in. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Now, you might call me pretty nerdy if I was to say you should get a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, and talk about, well, who is in your network. Do almost like a color-coded system of, okay, I need to reach out to this person. I've reached out to them. Now I need to follow up with them, because right now there's actually a huge amount of goodwill out there at the moment, right? Because everybody is in this storm together. We're all in different boats, but there is a sense of goodwill. And I can guarantee you, if somebody's in a job and they're working well and happy, and if one of their friends or ex-colleagues comes to them and say, listen, I've just been made redundant at Qantas, or I've lost my job here, can you help me? There's a huge amount of goodwill at the moment. So you'd be surprised at how much people will help. Now, the question is, Kev, you're 100% right. Networking isn't sending someone a text and saying, hey, keep me on your radar. It's about connecting with them again. If you can, obviously with restrictions, you may not be able to meet someone face to face, but certainly a phone call or a video call, but nothing beats face to face, just to find out what's happening in their world. Because you might spark conversation and somebody comes into your head where actually I'm going to network you with this person. So it really, really is a snowball effect in that respect, and face to face, nothing beats it.
Okay. Thank you, John. I might just throw it out to see, does anybody else have any questions that they'd like to ask John?
I'd just like to ask him his view on LinkedIn then. I just think that's, showing so much. I think that just can be very, I know it causes me anxiety, and everybody has business degrees and all of these things, and it shows percentages. How real is it, you think, or how real is that they're giving those, like it's showing that people are overqualified? Obviously, if that's what's happening, there's people far overqualified going for jobs now that they wouldn't have ever went for before.
Yeah, look, it's funny. I mean, LinkedIn is a great tool from a networking point of view. The double-edged sword is that, Roisin, as you mentioned, right now, if there's a role you're going for, LinkedIn's capability, you can see that there's 300 people applying for that job. Now, if you see that there's 300 and there's one, you say, oh my God, I've got a chance of 1 in 300. So it can be quite demoralizing. So the key thing is to, like what happens with LinkedIn, I mean, they do have kind of searches around capability and skills. How accurate, to be honest, anecdotally, I'm not 100% sure how accurate it is. I'm sure someone on LinkedIn would be able to give some insight, but they do things on keyword search, years of experience, things like that. So look, it can be quite tricky, but if you're going for a specific role and you've got that experience, you should at least get a call. But look, it is quite disheartening if you're 1 of 300, because how do you get cut through in an environment like that? Because they've got a pick of 300 people.
Yeah. Do you think, because they're saying more so your cover, do you think the cover letter now is more important than the resume, or, well, both obviously, but how to get, the good.
Look, it's interesting actually about cover letters. So what I find with cover letters is that the first thing, like most people, whether it's an internal recruiter or recruitment consultant like myself, sometimes they spend minimum 5 seconds on a CV to potentially tend to scan for work experience. That's the key thing first and foremost, is your work experience. Now, if someone's got that, they'll put them onto maybe the short list or long list, and look to go back to that person as a screening process. And then they may look at the cover letter, because if you're addressing some of those key things, they might say, well, Roisin's put in all this effort. She's outlined 5 key reasons why she's good based on the 5 key criteria. So in that essence, it's powerful. But more often than not, they really, really want to get your experience, where you've worked, what you've done. Look, depending on yourself, sometimes, for certain roles, they want a degree, etc. But look, nothing beats experience.
John, could I maybe ask, we obviously did a recent recruitment drive, and I find a marked difference between the Australian system and what would have been familiar to me in an Ireland context. I was getting cover letters that were 7 pages long, which were, but I would say the bulk of them were 7 pages long, on the back of demonstrating that they met the kind of essential and desirable criteria. I'm going, and my sons are kind of like at the younger end of things, and they're 1-page CVs. Can you give us some kind of offering in terms of what that cover letter or CV size should look like?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting one actually, because when I left in the UK and Ireland, it's very different. Your CV is 1 or 2 pages. It's short and sharp, where you worked, key achievements, key outcomes. Whereas when I landed in Melbourne 9 years ago, it was very much, no, you need to flesh out your CV. So more often than not, CVs can be anywhere from 3 to 5 pages, maybe 6 pages. But look, certainly a cover letter should only be a page. It should almost be an executive summary for the role that you're recruiting for and why you would be a good fit. Because after that, it just gets too much. As you put it, 7 pages going through that, people don't have the time to go through that anymore. So it's very much a time saver in terms of trying to make it as short and sharp as possible.
The other thing I suppose that I came across, sorry, I'm not sure who I'm cutting across there, just very quickly, was about it being the difference between the Irish and the Australian system was being outcomes driven. So it's not about what your roles and responsibilities were, it's a case of your deliverables.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, one of the key things, if you're going forward for a position, looking at your responsibilities, what you did day to day is really, really important. But ultimately, how you're going to be judged is what you achieve, so results. So it's really, really good to give facts and figures and proof ultimately of some of the key achievements, because that's what you'll be judged against versus your peers and who are going forward. And the way I think about it, if you're writing a CV and you're listing out all the key responsibilities you do every day, at the end of it, almost ask yourself the question, so what? Okay, well, what does that mean? What's the outcome of what I do? And that'll kind of give you a bit of a focus into to really nutting out the key results, achievements of, cost saving, growth, etc., etc.
And John, just on tying a few of these things together, how important is it, like from your perspective as a recruiter, if you have 200 applicants, for somebody to actually reach out to you directly, like via email or to pick up the telephone and ring you? Like, does that, I know I've heard that in the past, that's something that can separate people, that can, that somebody's taken that extra step to actually call you up and make that connection. Is that true, or is that just a myth that's out there?
It's interesting. It definitely shows you're keen. Like, if you follow up with a phone conversation, it definitely shows that you're keen and you're interested. What's the struggle now is that whether it's a recruiter or an internal HR person that you're contacting, if they're getting 200 applications, if you're one of those applications and you've got the right skills and experience, and if the recruiter is doing their job, they should find you anyway. But look, I look at it this way. It's no harm to say, hi, Mr. Recruiter or internal HR person, I've applied for this position, really, really keen to have a discussion. And at least that way, if they are going through it and your name does pop up, they say, that's the candidate who actually approached me. I think that's someone who sounds very, very interested. So it really depends, but I see no harm in doing it. And it just, at least you're getting yourself on the radar to that person. And if it's dealing with a recruiter, if I get a candidate that's good, now they may not be perfect for the role that I'm recruiting, but they could be actually very good for something else. So in that way, it could lead on to some another conversation or another role down the line if that initial role isn't exactly the right fit.
Okay.
What's the percentage, do you think, now that are doing Zoom meetings rather than Zoom interviews versus actual live interviews, meeting people, do you think? Do you think most of them are now Zoom ones at the moment?
Yeah, look, I'd say there's a lot of Zoom meetings and like, even from an onboarding perspective, when people now have been offered jobs, some of them aren't even going in to the office, and they're just working remotely. They're being set up with laptops, etc., etc. So I would say I'd almost go 90% at the moment are initial Zoom interviews, and there might be a face-to-face coffee. You know, it could be at the company, or it could be somewhere off-site, just to make sure that they abide by kind of the social distancing restrictions.
So for Zoom,
Sorry, go ahead, Lorraine, and I'll ask after you.
Oh, I just want, so for Zoom, I take it you still should be presenting yourself looking like exactly how you would when you're going for an interview. Is there
Yeah, look, I think it's
better than having the background or anything?
Yeah, look, I think it's important to, I mean, it's nice to have, I mean, if you've got photographs and stuff, it might show, or books in the background and stuff like that. Yeah. I think, you know, I wouldn't worry too much about the background. I think it's more if you present well and, you know, you come across engaging. I mean, nothing, again, beats face-to-face, but at least with a Zoom, it's a bit more intimate than a phone conversation, and that you can see somebody and maybe you can see their animation and the language they use. So, yeah, I think Zoom, you dress for the occasion, you dress professional and smart, based on the role you're going for.
Would you recommend the crib in the background here, John? Does that work? Is that okay?
It shows a very softer side of you, so yeah, I think it's good.
Maybe sitting it and then they...
Maybe sitting it, yeah, it's a good idea, right? Yeah. Sorry, Roisin, I think you had a question, had you?
My question was kind of just what Lorraine said. Do you have any tips on Zoom interviews? Because they're quite different, but I think Lorraine sort of asked that.
Yeah, and actually the one thing you can do, I mean, we're living in such uncertain times. If you do have a Zoom interview, you know, if you've got it lined up, there's no harm in asking, just as an FYI, how would you like, you know, what's the attire for a Zoom? You know, you can feel free to ask it. You know, you can say, look, I was going to dress up quite formally, but what's the attire that I need to have? And you never know, that the hiring manager might say, don't worry, I'm going to be in my t-shirt and jeans, so, you know, casual is fine.
Yeah. I just have another question as well, and it follows on from the CV and the cover letter. And if you are reaching out to someone, if you see an ad and it's quite generic, they haven't given you any contact details, what do you do with, how do you address it? Do you address it to the hiring manager, or should you try to investigate and dig a little bit deeper to put the right name on the cover letter? Yeah,
look, I think it's if they've not given you information of who the point of contact is, sometimes you're putting your CV quite blindly in. But if they don't give the information, look, you could be very, very proactive and find out who that hire manager is by going on LinkedIn or Google. But in an instance like that, I think what HR are probably trying to do is just streamline the process so that all the candidates, you know, send through their generic CVs in a certain, you know, manner, so they can manage the process and screen accordingly. So if they don't give a name, you know, it's up to yourself and your own discretion whether you think it's worth your time and energy. If it's a role you think you're absolutely fantastic for, you know, maybe you could reach out to the head office and talk. But people are so busy at the moment. Sometimes just putting your application in, and if you've got the right CV and background that they're looking for, you should get a call. It's interesting and I'll talk about from the other side of the fence. So your ability to get an interview versus your ability to do a job are completely separate. Now, what I mean by that is, you know, in an advertisement for a role, you might see, you know, excellent communication skills, exceptional presentation skills, collaborative, great project management skills, great stakeholder management skills, and they'd be 5 key criteria. Now, a lot of people would say, yeah, I've got that. So, but on the other side of the fence, if an employer is going through 300 CVs, they've got to have reasons to not include you in the shortlist of people they're going to screen. So again, that goes back to the experience and the type of background that they're looking for, because sometimes they can be really, really specific. If you've come from food and they want food experience, they'll probably just talk to someone from food. Now, sometimes that can be short-sighted, because they could be an excellent candidate that has, other skills but has come from a different industry. But, your ability to get an interview is very much at the behest of who's hiring and what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I don't know if, what Roisin was also thinking was, so do you put do you still use dear sir, stroke madam, or to whom it may concern, or like that? Is that what you meant as well, Roisin? What you express it to if you don't have the name? So what's the protocol now? Do you put
I think
dear sir,
concerns,
or to whom it may concern? Yeah,
I think to whom it concerns, to whom it may concern. I'm writing this cover letter for the application of this specific role.
Just John, just for the last, or there may be other questions, but I know you mentioned earlier you were going to, and you've touched on it throughout, but you were going to talk a little bit about mindset, particularly just in the current climate, I guess. What tips would you have in relation to that if somebody's looking for a role?
Yeah, look, in a weird way, there's kind of, I think of candidates and in a job search, there's kind of 3 different scenarios. One is, you're unemployed at the moment, or you're finishing contract, or maybe you're going to be made redundant. And the second is you're in a role and you're quite happy. And the third is you're still employed and unhappy. Now, for the first one, which is you might now have been recently made redundant, the mindset is you have to be really kind of clear on what you want, because what you don't want to do is jump into the wrong role, and in 6 months down the line say, that wasn't right for me, I should have waited a little longer. So I'm a big believer, you may not get the 5 out of 5 job, and you've got to be quite pragmatic now, I think, in the current climate around, the type of business, the type of role. But if your gut feel, if you have a good feeling about a company and about a hiring manager, and you do your due diligence on them as a business, etc., and you have a good gut feel, I'm a big believer in, I think you should take that role. Because you don't want to then not have it, and you could be waiting another 4 weeks, 6 weeks, however long. So that's one case. And it may not be relevant at the moment, but the best time to actually look for a job is actually when you're in a job and you're happy, because you're only going to move for something better. So, if you don't have a job, you've nothing to compare to. So it's a case of, well, this is the only role I'm interviewing for. Do you take it, or do you wait for the next one? And there's no right or wrong answer. I think it's, you have to do a few things around, having a meeting with them, doing your homework on the company, the manager, etc. And if you have a good gut feel, go for it. But it's really important. I'll go back to the mantra I said earlier. Don't equate your work to how long it takes you to get a job, because you could find a job in a month, which is perfect, but it could equally, take, 3 months potentially, or 4 months. And in the current climate, I'm sure there's going to be people out of work for potentially 6 months and longer, depending on your field or level of experience.
Great, thank you, John. Does anyone have any more questions? I think I cut someone off there. Was that you, Roisin? Did someone have another question before I started speaking?
I've got one question. John, that was fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing. John, I was going to ask, what are some of the myths that you're hearing out there about the current landscape, the job landscape?
Well, look, we to be honest, right now there's such uncertainty at the moment. You've got job keepers at the moment, which I don't think we'll get a true reflection of what the economy is going to be like until we're allowed to go back to, I suppose, normal business conditions. But when and what that looks like, we don't know. It may be extended. So there's a lot of, I suppose, preconceived ideas of it being extended in certain sectors. So right now it's very, very hard to make a call. We can make assumptions, but nobody really knows. You look at Melbourne, Melbourne have gone back a step now. We're lucky, I suppose, in New South Wales. But I think, you know, in terms of myths, I'm trying to think of what myths there are out there. Look, I think, you know, we talk about first impressions sometimes are, you know, the most misleading. And I think they are, because, you know, you meet someone that put on their game face for one interview. It's really about, you know, getting to know someone over 2 or 3 interactions and maybe getting other stakeholders involved as well. And that's from both a candidate point of view and from an employer point of view.
Thanks, John.
Hopefully I answered that question.
No, it's great. No, it's just if there was anything you were hearing, like, it's just interesting to hear, because you're obviously close to the ground, and you might hear the rumor mill about things. So yeah, just really curious to hear it. But no, that's very helpful. Thanks, John.
Any other questions? Just mindful of the time, but it's probably time for maybe a few more questions if anyone has any.
Just in terms of, I'm thinking of people who might watch this back. So for people who were maybe on a working holiday visa when they came across and they're looking for a job where they get sponsorship opportunities, is there any tips that you would have? Like, when's the best time to mention that? Is it better to get your foot in with the company first and start talking about it, or should you be more direct up front? Any advice on that?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because when, you know, the landscape has changed so much in the 9 years. You know, when I came out here in 2011, it was quite straightforward to get, you know, a 417 visa at the time and a working holiday visa for 4 years. Whereas now, you know, they're putting a lot more red tape around it, so it's not as easy. The tips I'd have, I think you can never lie. I think if you're asked about your visa, I think it'd be really bad if you lied, because you'll go down a rabbit hole, and, you know, it just won't be good. I think if they don't mention it initially and they want to chat to you, I think it's when you get in front of them face to face and then mention it throughout the process that, look, if you look to take me on, I would need to get sponsored on a long-term basis. And by then, hopefully, you've done enough where they say, right, we're going to give you a chance, we will sponsor you. So from that point of view, timing wise, right now, because it's so difficult, you know, even Australians, permanent residents, are finding it hard to get a job. So it's going to be even more of a challenge for people on working holiday visas. But look, there is definitely hope out there. You've just got to make sure, you know, you go back to the basics of your network. That's going to be key, you know, especially if you're an Irish person over here, making sure you're connected with the Irish Chamber of Commerce, you know, the Ireland Funds, the Lansdowne Club, you know, Irish Support Agency, e-guys. So there's an awful lot you can do behind the scenes, because ultimately there's so much out of your control. When you apply for a job, then you're waiting for them to come back to you. Whereas from a networking point of view, you can be really proactive around networking and talking to people through social clubs, through chambers, like I spoke about. So it's really, you have to drive your career. You should never rely on a recruiter or a direct process. It's really important that you take ownership and be proactive.
Okay. Thank you.
Just like to say a big thank you to you, John. Really appreciate you taking the time and providing some really, really great insights there, that I think will be of huge benefit. It's certainly been of huge benefit to everyone on this call, and I think it'll be for everybody else who watches this back. Where can people connect with you, or where can they hear from you, or do you want anyone to connect with you?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose I've got, I mean, I can give my email out to you guys. You know, my domain is marketing recruitment, but like, I think a lot of the tips, you know, are very, very universal. So if anybody wants to email me, you know, I'm happy to help in the current climate. It's jcorrigan at sharp&carter.com.au. That's JCORRIGAN at sharp, SHARPANDCARTER.com.au.
Great. Thank you so much, John.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, John.
Thanks.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you,
John.
John.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.